What's up, Rockstars? I have another big update for you. This is all over Petersen Games. They are partnering with Catalyst Games. We'll be going over that. And they are also suing the crap out of a German distribution company. We'll talk about that as well. There's a lot to discuss in this one. It's pretty heavy. I've summarized it for you in a pretty good fashion, so we shouldn't spend too much time on it. Okay, so before I dive into this, I have reached out to Arthur from Petersen Games and, just to kind of establish a communication there. I'll be talking with him at a later date. Obviously, he can't say too much about the lawsuit because that's how the law works. Additionally, I will be reaching out to the German company. I'm not going to even try to pronounce their name. It's CCS. To see if they have any comment, but don't expect too much. Again, it's a legal matter now, actual lawsuit in Utah. So we'll dive into all that. Just know that is kind of coming up. I'll let you know what updates I can get from that. But I have reached out to one party. I'll be reaching out to another one. The Petersen Games one I reached out because we'll be talking about this as well. This being the Catalyst Games partnership with Petersen Games. So if you didn't know, Catalyst Games does stuff like Battletech Mercenaries, right? They did this, the top 20 highest funded Kickstarter ever at 7.5 million. Huge there. They even currently have a Kickstarter. I'll go in a link down in the description below to it. Shadowrun Takedown. So they're doing that as well, but obviously a much smaller scale thing. This is just a Shadowrun, which is a brand I like because of the video games, but people have been doing the tabletop version for a long time. And now there's board games and stuff as well. So this is kind of what they typically do. If you look at their stuff, the Battletech is definitely the huge stuff. They do a lot of RPG things as well that do very well at retail also. So, but their big ones have definitely been the two Battletech ones there. But that's kind of what they do. Now, the announcement says that Catalyst Games Labs is pleased to announce that it is working with Petersen Games on future publishing, on a future publishing relationship. That's key. Future publishing relationship. But also importantly, this includes bringing both Cthulhu Wars and Planet Apocalypse back into production and ensuring both games are available to hobby stores and communities around the world. In other words, continue manufacturing those for retail with a strong retail presence. That is what Catalyst Games knows pretty darn well. It does say here, Catalyst Games Labs also hopes to assist in accelerating their fulfillment of several open Kickstarters, but details are being worked out. So we don't know the full details yet. That's the kind of stuff I want to be talking with Arthur from Petersen Games with a little bit, but also just generally about Petersen Games and, what they've been through and public perception, all sorts. There's a lot we can go over. So I look forward to that conversation. It might even be able to be recorded for you guys. So let me know if that's something you'd be interested in seeing. But the key is Cthulhu Wars, Planet Apocalypse, golden. Everything else, they're working on it to see what that looks like. So they're not necessarily out of the bag yet on that. And the lawsuit has to go into that as well. But that's something to kind of keep in mind. Now, if we go to here, one thing Petersen Games said, this was kind of their announcement, again for Cthulhu Wars. Petersen Games designs and develops great games that the board game community loves. Our tentacles grab and haul you in. Petersen Games has struggled for a decade to be a full-service game publisher. Sadly, our tentacles do not run on time. Not just on time, but within budget and within scope and all sorts of other stuff. There's been a lot of issues, right? And they're definitely aware of that. This is something I have called out for since my first video covering them on my Make Games Not Campaigns thing. Now, I didn't deliver things nearly as well or as even thought out as I do now, or at least try to do now. Hopefully you appreciate the effort in that space on this channel over time, especially recently. But one thing I have been adamant about is that there are different skill sets, and the creator very rarely has the business skill set attached. It's because they're almost naturally at odds, right? The business wants to make money and stay within budget, and the creator just wants to create, right? And the best things I have seen when talking to developers is either a big change of wearing hats or getting help or partnering with somebody else to help them with. We've seen a little bit with Madara Games. We see it with Bantam West and stuff like that. There's a lot of these companies that kind of have this partnership where there's the creative guy and then there's the business guy. Creative Game Studios, same thing, right? And they kind of keep each other in check as long as they have a good enough power pool where the business guy can cap the creative. But the creative, when it's necessary, when it's good, gets that little bit because they know it's worth it, right? Stuff like that. It's a very hard thing to balance, but it's definitely different skill sets. And I've long felt that Sandy Petersen is that creative. 100% he is. He's just head in the sky wanting to create awesome stuff. But obviously that doesn't necessarily translate to business very well, right? And so that's kind of where a lot of the problem has been, is over-promising and just wanting to create and create and create. I created this and doing that and all that kind of stuff, right? A business guy is the one that's like, I know you created this thing, don't launch the Kickstarter yet, right? Like, you gotta hold it. And the creative guy's just excited about it, right? So I don't think a lot of it's like malicious or anything like that. It's just, I see it all the time. Petersen Games obviously had a big presence, and so that was kind of big on them. But I think that's great. I think it's very smart to do that. Now, one of the small issues is, and we scroll down here, you see people here saying stuff like, Catalyst, really? Catalyst has had a bad reputation among gamers, as bad as PG's current reputation is. Not true. I don't think it's that bad. This is like throwing gasoline on a fire to try and put it out. This guy said, they likewise have a track record of poor quality control, late Kickstarters, backers receiving the wrong stuff, and stuff not being sent out. Their latest one ended up with every backer missing tokens from the game boxes since the wrong files were printed for the game. The solution was to tell backers to go print their own if it's that much of an issue. Their last printing of Shadowrun 6th edition was so full of mistakes and of poor quality, it's laughable. Now, those are obviously just two opinions here among many. But when you do look at stuff like this, and they're like slew of stuff, there's a lot of good and there's some bad. They're definitely kind of, again, just throwing out everything and stuff like that. I don't think they really have their solid feet down on Kickstarter yet. So for crowdfunding specifically. Like I said, they have a retail presence and they've done a lot of these things, right? They've made 10 of them. But a lot of them are super small scale or like RPG themed, right? And then there are big ones like Battletech are kind of the only ones that are like really at scale huge. And those haven't seen necessarily the resolution yet. So we don't know exactly how they're ending yet, right? And obviously they're already now on this one and then they're on another one. I mean, they've done 10. So like they're pumping this stuff out as well. So is it necessarily a match made in heaven? I'm not exactly sure. I'm not super sold on it. My understanding is the president of Catalyst Games is friends with Sandy Petersen. So obviously a business partnership among friends can work out. It can be disastrous. I don't know. We'll see. It also might mean that they're kind of like-minded in that thing. I'm not sure. So we'll see. It can't be worse than the situation they were in. So on that note, I think that looks pretty cool. And again, shout out to the Shadowrun takedown. I will link to that down in the description below. Feel free to check that out, of course. And let me know, comment-wise, what you think on this. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this prolonging the inevitable? Should we just let these companies die? Like, let me know your thoughts on that. Moving on from that, we're going to be talking about some very serious stuff. Now, this is the whole plaintiff thing, right? I actually literally read this, okay? So you're welcome. I read it and I even put thought into it. I've summarized it for you. The main thing here is Plaintiff Petersen Games LLC by and through their attorney Adam D. Ford of Ford and Crane PLLC, and as verified by Sandy Petersen, hereby files complaint against CCS, which is how I'll be referring to them, whatever that word is, something edition, GmbH, and alleges as follows, and they kind of go into it, right? So we'll go into it. Just know that they are literally like suing them for RICO. What is RICO? Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Came out in 1970, and it is for dealing with unlawful activities of those engaged in organized crime. This is like crazy. If it works, that's cool. I'm no expert on law, obviously, so disclaimer on everything there. But this is literally for stuff like mafia stuff, right? And obviously other things as well. And it obviously can be applied to many things. But the idea is this abstract is actually really good at providing it. The power of RICO lies in its conspiracy provision based on an enterprise rationale that allows tying together apparently unrelated crimes with a common objective into a prospectable pattern of racketeering. In other words, this is all like unrelated happen chance stuff, but if you look at it as a whole, you realize that this crime that's being committed is organized, right? That's the whole idea. In other words, this is purposely and maliciously done and planned out to do on purpose, as opposed to just being bad at business, right? That's kind of the weird point here, because when we read through it, I'm going to read through the main issues. There's a lot of details we're going to be just not even discussing, right? But you have to make that decision. Is this something that's being purposely done or not, right? And of course, innocent until proven guilty, right? Maybe they're wrong here and CCS is actually all great. again, we'll hear from them. I'm sure they will respond in some way. Okay, so CCS is a large German shipping conglomerate and has for years been holding a small American family company. That's Petersen Games. Again, this is written by Petersen Games. It's definitely in their wheelhouse. Definitely pro them, right? Double and triple billing for services, we'll get into that. Sometimes for services not provided, breaching contracts, we'll get into that. And holding inventory hostage until ransom payments were received. It kind of is funny to see a company talking like backers. Backers with like Mythic Games always talk about hostage product and ransom money and stuff like that. And now here they are kind of talking with their distributor the same way. The total amount CCS owes Petersen Games related to its overbilling alone equals $495,789. The value of the inventory owned by Petersen Games currently being held hostage by CCS equals $340,205.58. Now, this doesn't match up another number filed later, so we'll kind of discuss that too a little bit. CCS has threatened to file a lawsuit against Petersen Games in Germany. So this is like a response to that. They've said, we're going to sue you. And so then Petersen Games is like, we're going to sue you first. Threatened to coerce EU custom agents to refuse Petersen Games products into the common market. Threatened to use their influence to have Petersen Games VAT tax registration canceled. And then in quotes, which will make business for you impossible. Threatened to open attacks on the reputation of Petersen Games on multiple online channels. And have threatened to sell off all of the remaining Petersen Games product we still have in our warehouses and keep the proceeds to them for themselves. Now, at the very end of this, and by the way, this is just 1.5 pages. I've summarized it. Don't worry. But we're going to discuss a little bit. At the very end of this, I do have my personal take on this. So I'll share that at the end. And then I'd love to hear yours as well, of course, especially if you have any more information on stuff like this. Okay, so after using many shipping, this is kind of like a chronological thing, and then we'll talk about the billing thing. After using many shipping partners for many years, in January of 2018, CCS proposed an agreement pursuant to which they would provide more favorable payment terms with interest accruing on the balance if Petersen Games would give them global exclusivity for shipping and logistics. Fearing disruption of their operations and CCS seizing inventory in their control, Petersen reluctantly agreed to the terms and entered into exclusivity and loan agreements with CCS and began to direct all their shipping needs through CCS. Now, this is kind of an interesting take. So, in other words, this is in 2018, and Petersen Games, for a while, had kind of been in kind of weird hot water. By the time I even got into the scene in 2018, they were kind of known as like spamming these campaigns and kind of going too fast. And again, my original Make Games Not Campaigns video featured them for a lot of these kind of reasons. So, it seems that they were already concerned with CCS seizing inventory in their control and then reluctantly agreed. It's almost like they weren't making you wouldn't fear that unless you were already making your payments and good on that and everything else, right? Unless there's more that they didn't go into in this instance. But for this specific instance, from what Petersen Games provides, information-wise, which again, we're getting one side of the story here. It's that, hey, they were worried that CCS was going to take over stuff. It seems they would probably claim like threatening like language, but honestly, like as long as you paid your bills, you should be good. So were they an issue there? And this was kind of an effort to stay in there? I don't know. What came out of this real quick, just as an aside, I didn't copy this over because it was a big long thing, is that essentially CCS, once they had a locked-in contract, were like really slow with them. This kind of stuff happens quite often because they're not trying to win you over, obviously, right? So they don't have to necessarily worry about your situation too much, right? They got to pay their bill either way. They're just accruing interest. Go on and load them last. Oh, you didn't get to it in the day? Oh, shucks. I guess we'll get to it tomorrow when it's also on the last, to go out. Oh, I didn't get, that sort of thing, is what Petersen Games claims happened. For instance, CCS's shipping partner in the United States, Liftwing LLC, erroneously shipped 160 pallets of games to Seattle in December 2022. Essentially, they claimed that they made a lot of mistakes. Here's some of them. And in January 2023, so over the course of 2 months. The product was not properly wrapped to prevent water damage, and many of the pallets were disorganized, causing damage to the product. After arrival in Seattle, Petersen Games inspected the pallets and found that when properly stacked, Petersen Games was able to consolidate the inventory to only 92 pallets, a reduction in about 70 pallets. The misalignment of the shipping caused an approximate double of the cost of shipment, a loss to Petersen Games of approximately $25,000. This is something I've commented on several times from other companies where there's an issue with the manufacturer and they don't pay for it. You're just out the money. Petersen Games is out the money, right? This is kind of one of the first instances I've seen and I've covered where they're fighting the manufacturer, being like, no, you got to pay for your mistakes. So anyway, interesting to note that, and I'm wondering what the trend will be following this. I imagine if they're successful, you're going to see this more often because all these mistakes happen. Or more likely, when you go into business and you sign on to like contracts and stuff, there's going to be stipulations on what is and isn't liable from each side in their mistakes. Because the same thing happens there too, right? Where it's like, oh, you got to ship within, the December timeframe. And it's like, yeah, that looks great. But then the development company, right, like Petersen Games or some other company, is late to give you all the files you need or late to make a decision on their products or whatever. And now suddenly you have all these other things. So while, yeah, you said you'd get to it, now these other people who were on time are available. So we'll just do those. And then you're doing those and you had a delay. And like, it's messy. It's a lot of logistics. I don't know how they'd work out. In the fall of 2022, Petersen Games entered into a contract to sell a significant portion of its inventory being held by CCS for $269,000 on condition that it be received by the buyer in time for a Christmas sales event. Now, this is also kind of interesting. I don't know how this works. I'd love some more detail on this. So what they're saying is, hey, CCS has this inventory, and in 2022, when Petersen Games is very much looking for money, right, trying to find how to get money, selling it for sale at retail. And it's one of the things where, was that backers stuff? Or did they make retail stuff and then just didn't distribute it? It almost sounds like CCS has this inventory to send to Kickstarter, but obviously it's like, hey, you got to pay us first. And then they're like, okay, well, we'll just sell part of that you're holding and sell that. And then you just send it to them and then we'll figure out the backers. Like, I don't know how that works. That's what I read into it anyway. That's what it seems like to me, which is kind of a messy situation. CCS lied to Petersen Games, saying they could not determine which pallets were to be shipped to the buyer because the pallets were covered in opaque plastic. Petersen Games later learned the pallets were wrapped in clear plastic, could have easily been differentiated. This lie and failure to ship product, even after entering into a loan exclusivity agreements, resulted in Petersen Games losing the contract. Now, one interesting thing there is I don't know what benefit CCS gets from not making that sale. Like, wouldn't that just mean that they finally get paid the money that they're hoping to get? You would think that they would actually do that. And in other words, if their purpose is, I'm going to like racketeer here and profit off of doing stuff like this, or do they think, we'll just keep it in the warehouse, keep charging you the warehouse fees and the interest in the contract and all that kind of stuff, and we don't care. I guess I could see it either way, but it is kind of weird that they wouldn't be like, shoot, we can get rid of this stuff and actually get paid. That'd be nice. In an email communications in December 2022 between Petersen Games and CCS demanded payment of the escrow funds. They had set up an escrow to say, hey, you deliver your stuff, then you get paid. And it was $150,000, and conceded that it is still holding inventory. As of late January 17th, 2023, Maxi Ebert confirmed that the majority, but not all of the goods have been picked up. So in other words, they still hadn't done it. CCS is to this day still holding Petersen Games inventory valued at $567,009.30 hostage in Canada and Europe, demanding the release of the escrow money while they are still not performed their obligations under the loan agreement of November 1st, 2022 to actually get rid of it. This is a different number, obviously, right? So they're saying, hey, CCS holds $569,000 worth of Petersen Games stuff in Canada and Europe. And then up here, they said the value of inventory owned by Petersen Games currently being held hostage is $340,000. That's like a big number difference. I don't know what that means. Again, it obviously doesn't go into all the nitty gritty on that, though that would definitely be a question I have. Like, okay, well, which number is it? How much do we actually hold? That's kind of weird. Okay, so that's kind of a lot of the logistics. There was a lot of nitpicking in there too, but let's talk about the billing because this is one that's a little bit more tested. Okay. Petersen Games engaged Investable SLC LLC, Investable, as outside financial expert to assist them in analyzing the billings and financial dealings with CCS. Investable spent nearly 100 hours studying all invoices sent by CCS and payments made by Petersen Games using two independent methods and data sets. First, Investable analyzed invoices through CCS's customer portal, Wowie, and discovered 9 types of billing errors out of a total of 840 total invoices. Now, there are several listed here that are barely any different and kind of obtuse. This is kind of one that's notable, though. 33 instances of double invoices, with both invoices being paid. In other words, Petersen Games was sent an invoice to pay for a fee, and they were like, sure, here's the check, we'll pay for it. Then they got the same invoice sent a second time, the exact same invoice number, and then paid it again. Now, this is on both parties, right? I mean, obviously both aren't managing this very well. One is just paying bills without realizing even like, what have we paid? What do we owe? Stuff like that, right? Because Petersen Games paid the same invoice twice, which they could have noticed. Obviously, so could CCS. They could have noticed, hey, we just sent them the same bill again, charged them again, and they paid us again, right? So obviously, I think both sides failed there. Ideally, the person sending the invoice is taking care of things. So I think there is a certain level of trust when it comes to being invoiced, that they're all unique and stuff like that, but apparently not. Second, Investable collated all invoices from CCS to Petersen Games into one table, which revealed many instances of invoices logged in incorrect years, many instances of unpaid invoices being reissued without zeroing out the previous invoice being reissued. In other words, the thing was like, hey, so here's an invoice of the total, right? And then here's an invoice here, and you pay that, and then they still have the invoice of the total without without your payment taken out of it, right? Stuff like that. Investable reported to Petersen Games that before accounting for duplicate payments, the most that Petersen Games could owe CCS for its services was $114,416.13, far less than the $481,950 and 29 cents that CCS claimed that was owed. Now, what I don't know here, and again, this would be interesting to know, is they had that escrow thing for $150,000. Is this saying that total forever for all of it was $114,000? Or are they saying that still after all these double payments and stuff even, you still owe $114,000? I suspect it's the second one. I suspect it's that, and this isn't related to like the 150 that they thought they owed and stuff like that. So it sounds like even now they owe that. They still owe. They have not paid everything, but they obviously owe less than the 481. And if that 150 escrow is still up, that means they could still pay for this 114, right? So kind of interesting to see that. And then finally, when confronted with these billing irregularities on a phone call with Kurt Erbert and Maxie Erbert of CCS, CCS became upset and questioned whether Investable obtained the invoice data they analyzed, where they got it. When told that the invoices came from CCS's own internal Huawei system, the Erberts hung up the phone on Petersen Games and Investable. I think obviously that says quite a lot. It sounds like this is a case of two companies really struggling with logistics, really struggling with their operating business and what they're doing. It's an inherently very complex thing. Like I said, it's the reason why 3PL or third-party logistics company exists. It's why a lot of these companies use it, because just shipping is confusing. Nonetheless, paying for all this and billing it and shipping it across the world and getting through customs and port fees and these fees and those fees and that way of shipping versus this way of shipping and tracking and all this kind of stuff. And then manufacturing and warehousing and offsetting and stuff like that. I mean, often they have to set these games somewhere. In fact, a production run can go so long that you need to do that. Or maybe you have a window because they're busy and they only have so many printers, so they're busy printing stuff. You have to get in when you can, then you print partial and then keep partial and then print another partial and then match them all together and get them all there. And it's a super complex thing. And there's all sorts of fees and invoices that will be associated with that. So I can understand why companies struggle. I really can. So that being said, CCS sounds like it's a very big company helping a lot of other people. So if you are a game dev and you have any opinions on this at all, please reach out to me, even privately. I would love to hear from you. Again, my email is obviously attached to the YouTube thing and stuff like that. It's also on my website. Contact us and stuff like that. But if you have any information or any thoughts, any insights, I would love to hear from you. Additionally, if you work with CCS for your stuff, have they been good to you? Are you wondering maybe we should look at our invoices? In other words, it's odd to me that CCS obviously works with many companies and only Petersen Games is having issue with them. Either they're having issue with them because they're being treated a certain way, or because there's been misunderstandings, or because they're actually doing this and they're the first to notice because they kind of got into, the problem area of needing money, and so they start looking at stuff like this. I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. But either way, there's a lot of mess going on, open lawsuits going on. $500,000+ being talked about, right? I mean, at this point, it's between the 459 here and the 340 there, you're almost at $1 million, right? I mean, this is not exactly a light thing, especially when you're going after them with like RICO stuff. And this is what Catalyst Games kind of got into, and why I imagine the details are a bit not worked out yet, and why this is about a future publishing relationship, right? It's like, hey, going forward, make cool games. We'll help put them on Kickstarter and actually get them to people's doors and like do the whole campaign thing and stuff like that. I think that's genius. But there's a lot of like baggage with Petersen Games that is kind of interesting to see. And notice this isn't a buy. This is a relationship. This is a partnership, right? So what this eventually entails and how Catalyst Games can or even want to even touch that side of Petersen Games, the old stuff, we'll have to see. But anyway, that's it. That gets you caught up on kind of one of the bigger things that have happened in the industry lately. Definitely, I think a lot of people in the industry will be looking at this and wondering how this lawsuit ends up. Because like I said, these kind of mishaps happen all the time. Chip Theory Games famously just last year missed a holiday window because of a manufacturing issue where they didn't put the pegs in the right colors and stuff like that, or the chips, and that wasn't manufactured and assembled well. And that wasn't Chip Theory's game's fault, but they're out the money. So like, how do you even price that, right? You have no idea how much money you would have even made. So are there fees associated with that? Do they have to pay you a certain amount from, I don't know. I don't know how that ends up, but it gets kind of messy. Guys, let me know your thoughts below on Petersen Games, Catalyst Games, and the lawsuit, anything like that. I'd love to hear from you, of course, on the Make Games Not Campaigns initiative, all that kind of stuff. I'm all ears. Have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys again very soon with a review, so that'll be coming up next. So stay tuned for that. Take care, guys.